one of America's top Republicans, Lawrence King is serving a 15-year prison sentence for a multi-million-dollar fraud. But financial crime is only half the story. This is the true story of Lawrence King. It is the story of a cancer at the heart of America and of its continuing cover-up at the highest level. One man is attempting to uncover the full story. John DeCamp is among the most highly decorated Vietnam veterans. A former Republican state senator in Lincoln, Nebraska, he is now a lawyer fighting the legacy of Lawrence King's abuse of power.
It's a web of intrigue that starts at our holy of holies, Boys Town, Nebraska, one of the most respected institutions in the United States, and spreads out like a spider web through Washington, D.C., right up to the steps of the nation's capital, the steps of the White House, involves some of the most respected and powerful and richest businessmen in this United States of America. And the centerpiece of the entire web is the use of children for sex and drug dealing and drug couriers, the compromising of politicians, the compromising of businessmen, but worst of all, the corruption of key institutions of government that have the duty and responsibility to make sure these things never happen.
For John DeCamp, the trail starts in a unique town just outside Omaha.
World-famed Boys Town is in the news again.
Made famous by an Oscar-winning film, Boys Town is America's favorite children's charity. It was founded in 1917 by a Catholic priest, Father Flanagan.
Father Flanagan. The saddest spectacle in our social life is the neglected, unwanted, and unloved boy who has become a serious problem in our society.
Boys Town was started to be a home for orphans. It was after World War I. And since then, society has changed and the problems of boys have changed. And so now, it's a question of taking care of homeless, abandoned, neglected, abused boys, and now girls also.
Boys Town has been granted the privileges of an incorporated town, a Catholic diocese, and a school district for 500 children. Boys Town has cash reserves of $500 million, but still raises up to $35 million annually, solicited from the public by begging letters and promotional videos.
I'm Father Val Peter, caretaker of Father Flanagan Stream and executive director of Boys Town. Does Boys Town really exist, people ask me? You bet it does.
Located in the heartland of America, Boys Town youth have come from many backgrounds and locales. As they graduate, they shall seek new adventures and head for different places. But always, they shall carry with them the spirit of Boys Town. If you'd like to help Boys Town, send your tax-deductible gift to Father Val Peter, Boys Town, Nebraska, 68010.
Boys Town, for me, was the first thing I ever heard of when you think of institutions that you respect. Believe it or not, I was there for a while when I was a young boy. When an institution like that gets contaminated, then you better, if you got any decency at all, do something about it, or at least get it cleared up.
John DeCamp lays the blame for the contamination of Boys Town on the one-time leader of the National Black Republican Council, Larry King.
Larry King was the fastest rising black star in the entire Republican Party of the United States during all of the 1980s. And he was also one of the most evil individuals in this country in terms of being a dealer of children, in terms of being a thief, 40 million that they documented he stole, and in terms of using and compromising and corrupting one after another politician.
The base for his network was the Franklin Federal Credit Union, a people's bank in Omaha, Nebraska. Larry King was its general manager.
Thank you. This is especially an exciting day for me.
Mr. King was a very charismatic person. When he came to the credit union, he was brought in because the credit union was actually failing. He did everything to build the credit union.
King courted the leaders of Omaha's wealthy business district. Banks, industry, and charities placed millions of dollars in King's hands. From 1979, Larry King developed close commercial ties to Boys Town, and Boys Town youngsters were sent to work for his companies.
Boys Town had quite a few accounts at Franklin Credit Union. Those were considered very valuable accounts. They were handled exclusively by the bookkeeping department. But on the average of once a month or once every 2 months, we always seemed to incorporate a person from Boys Town.
But King used Boys Town not just as a source of young boys for his business. He prostituted them at sex and drug orgies. Paul Bonatti was a victim of King's abuse. He was also sent by King to lure Boys Town youngsters off campus.
Since we just drive around and go toward our homes as we used to see some of the scavenger hunts of picking up some of the kids. You know, just kind of win their confidence, become friends with them for a while. Start inviting them to the parties. The kids were 10 years old or older.
In 1986, King's plundering of Boys Town was reported by staff to its chief executive, Father Val Peter. Subsequent testimony proves that he carried out his own investigation, but that King's victims refused to talk to him. Monsignor Hupp now blames himself for Boys Town's association with Larry King.
Well, in retrospect, I regret having any association with Larry King. Had I known it at the time, it would never have happened.
Could you understand why a very detailed report from the social worker employed at Boys Town, identifying children and identifying their alleged abusers, never saw the light of day? Nothing happened with that.
No, I can understand that, because had I known that, I wouldn't put up with that. But is that something like that happened? I don't know.
Nebraska has a very clear statute that child abuse allegations should be reported to authorities. They shouldn't be reported to the principal of a school, director of a facility. They should be reported directly to either Child Protective Services or law enforcement.
And so Larry King remained free to feed his pedophilic parties with child victims. But in 1988, a routine review brought King's involvement with Boys Town youth to the attention of Nebraska's State Foster Care Review Board.
When the information presented to the Foster Care Review Board, either via the telephone reports, the personal reports, or the reports we reviewed, Larry King's name was consistently present as someone that the youth were making allegations against. I would say we handed over at least a foot-high amount of material to authorities, and nothing happened.
Omaha police now accept that Larry King may have been abusing children.
Good morning, Roberta.
But its most senior officer claims the evidence was not conclusive.
It is certainly possible that Mr. King was involved in illegal acts with children. If there was sufficient evidence of those types of allegations, he would have been prosecuted by the county attorney's office.
For me, it was very clear that the case was not investigated and not pursued because of the alleged perpetrators.
Those perpetrators, named by the children, were some of the richest and most influential citizens in positions of power in the state. Men prominent in industry, politics, the media, even the police. We can only name the ringleaders. Besides Larry King, they were department store millionaire Alan Baer and the celebrity columnist of Omaha's only newspaper, the World Herald, Peter Citron. With the judicial system apparently paralyzed, Larry King spent Franklin's money on courting political influence. $10 million went on jewelry, flowers, and private planes. He cultivated contacts in the inner circles of Ronald Reagan's White House. At his palatial homes, 3 in Omaha and 1 in Washington, D.C., he held extravagant parties for the influential and powerful. His lavish spending bought him a protected life.
Larry King was constantly heralded, cheered, applauded in the news media as the great businessman that's helping the poor people, the black community of Omaha.
The King's extravagance attracted the attention of the Internal Revenue Service. As a result, on April the 11th, 1988, the Franklin Credit Union was raided and closed by the FBI. King was arrested, and the federal investigation showed he had stolen $40 million from Franklin. Documents we possess reveal the FBI interviewed many of the victims of Larry King's sex ring, but no action was taken. In November 1988, Nebraska's state government set up a parallel investigation into Larry King. A legislative committee was formed. Its chairman was the Republican head of Nebraska's Banking Committee, corn farmer and state senator Lawrence Schmidt. Immediately, anonymous threats began.
I received a phone call on the floor of the legislature. Floor did not identify himself, but he said, "Lauren, you do not want to have an investigation of the Franklin Federal Credit Union." And I asked who I was speaking to. He said, "That doesn't matter, but you shouldn't have that investigation." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "It will reach to the highest levels of the Republican Party, and we're both good Republicans."
Undeterred, the committee began their investigations, and the money trail led quickly to the original allegations of child abuse. Carolyn Stitt was one of the first to testify.
The night before we testified before the legislative committee, I did receive a phone call at home that said, "If you speak, you won't live to regret it."
To protect the inquiry, Schmidt's committee hired special legal counsel and full-time professional investigators Gary Caradori and Karen Ormiston.
I said, "We do not want you to bring to the committee rumors, innuendos, nothing that cannot be backed up with facts." I said, "Bring to the committee that which we can take to a prosecutor."
The investigators found new victims of King's pedophile network, many on the streets of Omaha. The picture they built up was of a large ring of rich and powerful pedophiles, many named the same men as those involved with the Boys Town cases 3 years earlier.
They were telling us about prominent people in Omaha and elsewhere that were abusing children at parties.
The prominent citizens' names that originally came up were a concern to me because I knew many of those individuals, and I very frankly was shocked to have those names show up on the list.
To provide the committee with hard evidence, the investigators recorded their new witnesses on videotape. Paul Benassi had been the victim of abuse since he was 8. He was present at many of Larry King's sex parties. Caradori traced him to the county jail. He had been convicted of fondling his young cousin.
Who were some of these people that would come to these parties?
Media personality Peter Citron procured some of his victims from Boys Town.
The kids he liked were mainly around the age of probably about 8 and 13. It was mainly fondling and oral sex with them. He did have some anal sex, but he usually did that with the older kids.
The parties involved ever more sadistic abuse.
Whenever you were tied up, was there anybody else present other than you, Peter Citron? Yeah. Who was that? Alan Bear.
Millionaire Alan Bear hosted parties for a large number of sadistic pedophiles. Paul Benassi suffered at their hands.
You okay?
It's time to be up and I had some other kids phone sex on the late, so came to the window, started making cigarettes.
Okay. Just take a deep breath now.
And Troy Bonner.
Troy Bonner was how you was?
He was there.
Troy Bonner was found by the investigators and his videotape testimony taken under oath.
I was shocked when I walked in. There was a kid, I would say about 15 years old, out in the middle of the room. One guy was standing in front of him. He was bent over, and the other guy was like reaching under him, playing with his nipple. Wow. A guy who just told me was a police officer shoving beads up his rectum.
The police officer was shoving beads up his rectum?
Yes.
Bonner named Alan Bear as the man who introduced him to the sex parties.
Alan Bear was a sick fuck. Didn't care, wanted sex, nasty, I don't even know if you can call it sex. Everything, from just, touching to fruit, squash, huge squash, that big around, stuck into you, in your ass, heat things, hot things, poked at you and stuck in you.
But the center of the child sex ring was Larry King.
Larry King was the same kind of sick fuck Alan Bear was, except Larry King was more violent, more sure of himself, I got those scars on my own one night at a party where Larry King, wanted to see how strong a man we were or something, and have us put your arms together, and you'd light cigarettes, and as soon as you get burning, you just drop them down between your arms, and, let it burn. And then they'll just stand there naked and touch each other by holding our arms together and burn cigarettes with. It's on film someplace. And then they filmed it. Burning, I would, see him fuck a 10-year-old boy in the ass, until he bled, and, just pull out and stop, and, push him down, and then go out and, meet with decent people.
King would also provide underage girls for abuse. Alicia Owen told the investigators she was 15 when she attended her first party, introduced by a Boys Town boy. Caridori discovered her in jail where she was serving a sentence for passing bad checks.
I met some guys there that were from Boys Town, and it was at that party that I met Larry King. At the time that I met Larry King, I did not know him, but he was Larry King. I had met him. It was the first time I'd ever met him.
Larry King and Alan Bear frequently hosted the child sex parties in penthouse apartments at the Twin Towers luxury block in Omaha.
A lot of it was me handcuffed with my hands behind my head, and my feet tied, and doing different things.
What do you mean?
Sometimes you do guys staring over my face.
Okay.
Most of the time, Larry King took pictures quite a bit during that time.
I know it's difficult.
I don't know.
Okay.
And I think I could say no.
Okay.
But I know.
Okay. And Alicia, you're a victim. And at a young age, let's go off camera for a minute.
We were appalled. Appalled. I don't even know if it comes across on the video, the way it came across to us in person. It was incredible. It's incredible what these kids went through, I think.
Larry King was also here. He came in and we drank and did cocaine. I didn't do much. I he turned me on to it, Larry King did.
Drugs was a strong part of how they got control of some of the kids, because that's what some of the kids were there to get. They would do the sexual acts and then be provided with cocaine or whatever type of drug they wanted.
Heroin, I don't know, but that was my drug of choice. Till this day, I remain an addict.
And those of us that didn't like to be involved and didn't want to be involved were threatened. Chris?
And who would do these threatening remarks?
Larry King.
Larry King personally did?
And I think he did. And they threatened, that I can go find somebody that will kill you, and it will kill your family. You won't tell anybody.
Larry King was, I would say, the center of transporting the children around the country. The airplanes were usually in his name, at least in his name. They were paid for by Larry King.
We met them in Pasadena.
Met who in Pasadena?
We met Larry King was there. There was 3 boys that I had seen at one of the receptions at the Country Center were there. And I'm almost positive they were Boy Town boys. Almost positive. They were there.
You mean graduates of Boy Town? Well, not present.
I knew they were present because they were young.
Well, how would they get away so long?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Boys Town came up frequently during the investigation, but we found it very difficult to get information about Boys Town. I was not able to find any information from my visit there, and Mr. Caradori could not get information either.
Boys Town today remains unwilling to discuss its involvement with Larry King. We were banned from filming at Boys Town, and its public affairs officer refused any interviews.
I would have to give you a flat no. I'm just going to tell you at this point that we will not participate with you. We have no interest in talking to you folks. It's something that we don't even care to delve into.
By the spring of 1990, the Nebraska State Committee was convinced by the evidence of an organized child abuse ring. Its chairman, Lawrence Schmidt, sought the advice of his lawyer, John DeCamp. On his advice, Schmidt turned over all the sworn evidence to the FBI. But immediately, the videotape testimony was leaked to a hostile local media.
The media immediately started discrediting the witnesses. They were, the witnesses came across in the media, in the Omaha World Herald, especially, as the criminals.
The last 3 victim witnesses were demolished by the press, particularly the Omaha World Herald. The paper never looked for information that would support any of the allegations. The whole purpose of the story was to destroy any credibility that these youth may have.
I've heard that people said that Gary Caradori coached me and that he told me what to say, but the fact was I didn't meet Gary Caradori until way after I'd already talked to the Omaha police about the abuse and had named all the same people.
Paul Benassi maintains that neither the FBI nor the Omaha police took his allegations seriously.
And they didn't ask me very much about Larry King or even Alan Bear at all. They treated the allegations that I made about the people who abused me almost like a joke.
The stories were of such significance that the investigators first wanted to prove the accuracy of the stories. As they set about the investigation of the initially three, and then a 4th person was telling the stories, as the investigation developed, it became obvious to the investigators that the information was not accurate, that in fact it was an entire conspiracy of allegations, none of which had any truth to them.
I was very disappointed with the way the FBI and law enforcement treated the victims. They, in fact, turned them into the offenders, so to speak. And instead of taking the evidence that was delivered to them by the victims and interrogating the persons whom the victims identified, they seemed to bear down and try to get the victims to change their story.
It seemed to the investigators that the establishment of Omaha was closing ranks. Then Troy Bonner was brought in for questioning by the FBI.
The FBI's attitude was, just no, these kind of things don't happen. From the first interview when I went, and realized they don't believe a fucking thing I'm saying, they were just appalled. But I realized what that look in their eye was back then. It was fear. It was fear that, I had witnessed, firsthand things that would, destroy this city, people or the position, what I mean? It's not going to be believed, they said. It will not be believed. You will be found guilty of perjury. And they weren't telling me maybe. They were saying, there's no way. You go on with the story, you're going to jail. That was said to me direct.
Troy Bonner agreed to withdraw his videotape testimony. The FBI used Troy in an attempt to persuade fellow witness Alicia Owen into abandoning her evidence about Larry King's nationwide network of powerful pedophiles. We have obtained a recording of the phone call made by the FBI on March the 9th, 1990. It is significant evidence for John DeCamp.
This is Special Agent Michael F. Mott. Following will be a consensually recorded telephone call between Troy Bonner and Alicia Owen.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, what's going on?
I'd like to ask you that.
Talk to me.
No, you talk to me. I don't understand why you're lying. Why are you lying?
What are you talking about?
That's what I'm asking you.
You're calling me why I'm lying?
Yeah.
You concocted this whole thing, Alicia.
You're full of shit.
Either tell me what's going on.
You're full of shit.
Hey, look.
Who do you have listening on the line?
I have nobody listening to me. I'm listening to you, and I'm hoping you give me some fucking answers.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know what kind of game you're playing.
I'm not trying to play a game. I'm not going to go to jail for you. And that's what's going to happen.
Why would you go to jail? Jail for telling the truth?
No, jail for lying.
What have you lied about?
I haven't lied.
Okay, but why are...
Listen, shut up. Listen to me. You're not out here being talked to them every day. The pressure's kind of hard.
You literally have to have bricks for brains to take on the FBI in this country. And that's exactly what you have to do this properly. They now, in my opinion, in my investigation, are the architects of the cover-up.
We asked the FBI in Omaha for an interview about its investigation of the Franklin scandal.
Larry Holmquist for the FBI here. We feel it would be inappropriate for us to comment. We work this with the Omaha Police Department. We just don't feel it would be appropriate for us to make comments.
As the investigators sought out new witnesses, they found themselves under constant threat.
Gary was threatened several times. His vehicles were tampered with. I would think whoever tampered with them, it was a scare tactic because it was so obvious that they were being tampered with.
Gary got there was one piece of evidence I know he got that he even said he got one step ahead of him this time. He told us about this book. It was like addresses, telephone numbers, names. He said if they knew he had it, they'd kill him.
On July the 11th, 1990, Gary Caradori and his 8-year-old son, AJ, were flying home from Chicago in his light aircraft. They had watched the All-Star baseball game, and Caradori had been pursuing new leads.
Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are in Harold Cameron's cornfield trying to determine what caused this private plane to crash, killing its 2 occupants.
The bodies of Gary Caradori and 8-year-old AJ were found in the wreckage.
National Transportation Safety Board investigators say wreckage from the crash is apparently strewn over a 3/4 to 1 mile long stretch in this field.
The fact that the wreckage is scattered over a large area certainly demonstrates that it did break up in flight. The exact mechanism of breakup yet is still unknown.
The federal investigation was never able to discover what tore the plane apart.
There are things missing from the plane. His briefcase is missing. I think the plane was sabotaged. There's no doubt in my mind.
Within 24 hours of the tragedy, all Caradori's records were impounded by the FBI. Gary's widow, Sandy, is still unable to come to terms with her loss.
As a mother, I don't want to ever think that somebody murdered my child, let alone my husband. But I think if you'd ever talk to any parents, be it mother or father, who's ever lost a child, I mean, the worst thing that you can think of is that somebody was going to murder a child.
I really feel that somebody killed my brother. And inside me, I know that somebody killed my brother. If somebody could help us out somewhere, somebody knows something. And may God help those who did that to him and his family.
The effect of Gary's crash on the investigation, I think, in effect, put an end to anybody else coming forward. There are many victims. We knew of more. There are more. They're still out there. They're afraid to come forward.
That's when I was finished, because I figured out if they murdered Gary and his son, there was nothing that would stop them. There's no piece of paper. There was nothing we could come up with that was going to get anything done.
But Gary Caradori's death pricked Troy Bonner's conscience. He promised Sandy that he would tell Senator Schmidt's committee about the FBI's pressure which led him to lie.
I set the record straight. I was, going to do it. And would, the truth would come out, and somebody would be held accountable for his death. And then at the funeral, I had seen, FBI guys, and they looked at me. I was supposed to meet Senator Obeth and Schmidt for lunch after the funeral. And, that's when I decided. I told my mom, we're not going to do the lunch. We're going to hightail it out of Lincoln now.
Troy Bonner claims that pressure from the FBI and with the assistance of a county attorney's office in Omaha led him to swear a new statement claiming that he and Alicia Owen had concocted the entire child abuse story. He told this story to a grand jury formed to bring any charges. On July the 23rd, 1990, the grand jury issued a bizarre and contradictory report. It indicted Larry King for fraud and embezzlement and ruled that he had paid young men for sex, but dismissed allegations about his sex ring. It indicted Alan Baer for the serious offense of pandering for sex, but rejected evidence linking him to King or to Citron, whom it noted had been convicted of separate child molestation charges. It accepted that Troy, Alicia, and Paul Bonaffi had been abused, but not by the people they identified. And for refusing to withdraw her evidence, it charged Alicia Owen with perjury. Lawrence Schmidt's legislative committee issued a report denouncing the grand jury. Schmidt acknowledges that the system failed both the victims and him.
I had, I think, to distinguish a record as anyone can put together in 24 years. I was told that would be curtailed, and it was. I was told I'd have financial problems, and I did. The message was not lost on most politicians in Nebraska. I think the message was delivered was if any legislative committee ever tries to conduct a thorough investigation again, the same thing will happen. It has shaken my faith in institutions of government. It used to be a firm believer that the system would work, and that people who did things wrong would be punished. And we discovered victims who claimed to have been abused and who the grand jury acknowledged had been abused. But they did not try to find out who had abused those individuals. Instead, they convicted Alicia Owen of perjury. Indefensible from my point of view.
The trial took place in July 1991. Troy Bonner testified that the child abuse story had been an invention. As a result, Alicia Owen was sentenced to between 9 and 25 years in prison.
I can't find a case in the history of this country where some kid got sentenced to 25 or 30 years in prison for something like this. If you were going to pick a what I call a telesign, something that says something fishy about the whole thing, it was in the sentencing itself. For some reason, they had to send a signal to every kid who was a potential witness. My opinion again. A signal so loud and clear, if you dare to come forward, if you dare to talk, watch what happens.
Alan Baer was fined $500 after pleading no contest to a reduced charge of aiding and abetting prostitution. Peter Citron served 2 years of a 3 to 8 year sentence. Thanks to Troy Bonner's lies, Larry King never faced child sex charges. For the $40 million fraud, he was given a 15-year sentence, 10 years less than Alicia Owen.
I feel really sick. I should be taken out and shot for doing that. And if that was to happen, I would go with it.
John DeCamp, former state senator and Vietnam veteran, is now the only man fighting to help Larry King's victim. He is the lawyer trying to overturn Alicia Owen's conviction and to expose the cover-up.
I live in Nebraska. Hell, I was born here, raised here. I have 4 kids growing up here. Like it or not, it's my heritage, you know. Well, if it's a dirty cesspool so that I got to live in or look back on that I left, that ain't good. The real cost, if I were going to say to my family, has been the fear and intimidation it's put in some of the kids. A couple of the kids are really, really frightened and really had some sleeping problems over, here, this or that. So that's been the real concern I've had.
John has received anonymous threats and has turned for advice to his friend and one-time boss, former head of the CIA, William Colby.
Bill Colby told me better than anything. The one thing the bad people can't afford is publicity, and knocking you off right now or doing something obvious to one of your kids would bring them more trouble than it's worth.
I said, you have to consider the possibility of some danger to not only your reputation, but to your person. I mean, people do react rather violently to some kinds of charges, or particularly if they're true, there's more apt to be a negative reaction than if they're false. If they're false charges, then they can be reacted to in a normal way, a libel suit or whatever. But if there's truth in it, there can be a danger in that situation. We've seen that happen in other cases.
John arranges to meet Troy Bonner, the young man he sees as the key to the cover-up.
He's in great danger. The reason is he carries the secret, so to speak. He served his purpose for the FBI and others by committing the lies that put the seal on the cover-up.
He knows that Troy's evidence will be crucial to Alicia Owen's case, and Troy wants to tell the truth, despite very real fears.
My fear is that, I'm not going to be believed again. It's just going to be a whole other kind of exploitation like it was last time. And afraid that that's going to happen, or, I might end up dead, or a loved one might end up dead.
Troy has an overriding reason for putting the record straight.
Maybe somebody has a better idea.
I want this to go forward and have something done so that all those other kids who a lot worse things have happened to can come forward and see that action can be taken.
You have to, if you want to protect yourself and your life and your family's life, both now and particularly in the future. is to use the institutions of government that have been set up to protect you and make them work. That means you go into federal court, you go after the people that have done this cover-up, and you expose it so there's no longer any percentage on their part in eliminating you because the secret's out.
Yeah, that's why we're here today, to let it out.
John's advice to Troy to tell the truth in court puts him at risk of prosecution by the county attorney's office.
Potentially, they could decide to charge him with perjury, because now he is telling that they forced me to lie. I did lie at Alicia's trial. I did lie before the grand jury. I didn't because the authorities were forcing me to do it, and I was scared for my family. Potentially, they could charge him with perjury this time.
Troy's appearance in court will keep Alicia Owen out of prison. She's on bail while DeCamp appeals against her perjury conviction. As her hearing approaches, vital new evidence emerges. Alicia claims that some of Troy's videotaped testimony was withheld from the grand jury which indicted her.
The tapes that were shown to the grand jury had been edited. Everything that matched Troy's statement
Shown.
that matched mine
I know it's
was
raised.
edited out. And I think maybe one of the things we want to do is show the judge specifically how, where these, little 5-minute segments of, look, this tape says this, and then show him it isn't in this tape, and this is the tape the grand jury saw.
I'm going to attempt to get these tapes, and we'll see what happens next.
But to obtain the tapes, DeCamp must approach some of the very officials he has accused in court of being involved in the cover-up, the county attorney's office which ran the grand jury.
In the good old Alicia Owen case, 127-194, I'm trying to get the evidence, the tapes and the transcripts of Troy and Danny. Troy Boner.
Get that up here.
Yeah.
Look at the county attorney. They have all the bills up there.
Oh.
Robert.
Let me guess. Robert Siegler has them.
Robert Siegler is the prosecuting attorney trying to send Alicia Owen back to prison. After lengthy negotiations, DeCamp emerges with the tapes the grand jury never saw.
And it was like $4,000, about $4,000 cocaine.
Okay, and what airline?
In more than 2 hours of taped testimony, Troy details trips across America on behalf of Larry King and Alan Baer, trips for drug deals and sex. It corroborates Alicia's evidence.
It was like an hour, and then a big plane from Dallas to Los Angeles.
Did anybody go with you?
Alicia Owen.
For John DeCamp, this is the proof of the King sex ring for which he has been waiting.
Here it is. So to speak, the smoking gun that they could go out and verify, the corroboration. In other words, the linkage to King that was denied. Cover-up. Organized, planned, deliberate cover-up.
The courthouse, Wahoo, Nebraska. The hearing begins. Alicia Owen is ready to testify. So is Paul Bonatti. But there is no sign of Troy Bonner. DeCamp discovers that Robert Siegler has sent the young man a subpoena. Fearing arrest for perjury, Troy has gone into hiding. DeCamp is without his most vital witness.
Trying to subpoena him with those guys. Trial.
In court, Alicia's case is adjourned. The county attorney's office begins to search for Troy Bonner, but county attorney Siegler won't say why.
You're about to charge Troy Bonner with perjury.
Every victim witness who stepped forward in any way, or even was a potential witness that somebody heard about, has either been killed, put in jail under some theory or other, terrified or run out of the state, discredited. Every perpetrator, even the convicted one, have been treated as conquering heroes.
Peter Citron lived in the same house where he abused many of his young victims. Alan Bear lived in the most exclusive part of Omaha. He recently bought a downtown shopping mall. Many of the other abusers named by the children have risen within Nebraska's state government and legal system and within the Republican Party.
Obviously, the FBI was protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of old pedophiles having improper relations with little boys. They were protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of drug peddlers. They were protecting, in my opinion, they were protecting some very prominent politicians, some very powerful and wealthy individuals associated with those politicians and the political system, up to and including the highest political people in this entire country.
In search of the men who protected Larry King, John DeCamp goes to Washington to investigate King's connections in the Republican Party and on Capitol Hill. Paul Benassi provides him with the evidence that Larry King threw child sex parties here at his rented $5,000 a month Washington house.
I was about 14, about 1981. At first it was about 3 or 4 times the first year. After that it was about once a month. Some of the parties, when they started off, were straight political type parties, no sex. And then when some of the men had left, some of the politicians had left, the ones that had planned on engaging in some type of sexual activity, that would come after the party. Some of the kids would be held downstairs in some of the rooms where if they acted up or if they started freaking out because of the drugs that they were on, they'd put them in a room that they couldn't get out of, and they'd lock them in.
What kind of drugs?
Anything you wanted, cocaine, heroin, speedballs.
You're telling me those
weed.
things were at these parties where you had Larry King and prominent politicians?
Yes.
Were they readily available to anybody at the party?
At the after parties, they were readily available for anybody. Beforehand, they did it more upstairs than they did anywhere else, and kind of in the back room.
Were any attempts ever made that you know of to expose this situation?
As far as I know, nothing's ever been done, and most of the people that were in there had already been, I guess, compromised.
King's partner was Washington lobbyist Craig Spence. Spence took youngsters, including Benassi, on private midnight tours of the White House.
So you were in the White House then?
Yes.
And how did you gain access?
Well, I came down with Larry King, but Craig Spence was the one that arranged the trip for us. And it was kind of a gift for our services that we were doing.
How many times were you on this kind of a trip?
I came to it on 2 times.
2 times. And were you used for sex on those occasions?
Not until after we left.
After you left the White House?
Yes.
What time of night?
It was usually around midnight. To me, it was just kind of weird being in the White House at that time of night, getting to go into places that the guy was telling us that nobody didn't go to. I seen rooms in there that I'd never even heard about. Craig Spence and Larry King had a couple of groups. One was called Bodies by God, and they had the Cowboys, and there was another group that was started by Larry King, which was called the Golden Boys, which was kids that were usually under the age of approximately 10.
Spencer's Cowboy Network was investigated in 1989 by reporter Paul Rodriguez of the Washington Times.
We had uncovered a series of allegations from some minors, and it led me to a callboy operation.
It sure fits with, this boy Paul Benassi. And he tells the tale of being brought to the White House on occasion, kind of as a reward for the kids.
Craig Spencer said he committed suicide. He had advanced stages of AIDS. He was an AIDS carrier and he killed himself. This was the thing that always bothered me. They claimed it was the largest male prostitution ring in the city that they've ever had uncovered. It was $1 million a year minimum.
Yeah.
And yet they only prosecuted the operator, Henry Vinson and 3 of his lieutenants, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
They never went after any of the Johns, or the clients. This operation claimed to have clients that ran from the White House to the Capitol Hill to the State House to the churches, within the media.
Exactly what Paul describes as the people he was in.
And a lot of the stuff led there, but we couldn't quite nail it at all cases because, again, to accuse someone of high stature, you've got to be very careful.
I understand.
We were able to do it through the mother lodes that provided us credit card receipts and canceled checks, and then lists of the clients. The prosecutors knew all this stuff. There was approximately 20,000 documents they had. They sealed the entire record by court order. And we have we've attempted on several occasions to unseal that, and we've been told it will be a cold day in hell before those records ever get unsealed. And it makes me wonder what's in those records.
Yeah.
John DeCamp believes that the legal system is still being subverted and that the people protected are still at the heart of the American establishment. He hopes that this program will expose a serious miscarriage of justice, but the opposition is formidable.
It's beyond belief that arguably the most powerful person in the world, the President of the United States, in the form of Richard Nixon, could not prevent the investigation of Watergate, or that President Reagan could not prevent the investigation of Iran-Contra. And yet somehow this group of unnamed, unknown, anonymous individuals in Omaha, Nebraska have such power they can control and protect all of these people from being investigated. Those allegations are ridiculous.
Well, first of all, Nixon did cover up Watergate, number one. Bush did cover up Iran-Contra, at least officially. And Omaha has successfully covered up this situation. In each case, it was the press that exposed the problem. It wasn't institutions of government. They had been corrupted. They had been compromised. They were the ones doing the cover-up.
The Attorney General is now involved. DeCamp's evidence has been passed by William Colby to a senior lawyer in the Justice Department.
He did say that the Attorney General's office would be very sensitive to any charges of abuse of children. This was a matter of considerable priority to the department, that this sort of thing not take place, and that they would assign an officer to look into the case.
For John DeCamp, the story of Larry King's corrupt empire holds a dire warning for all America.
If you can control about 3 or 4 key elements, you can totally own a state. You can make right wrong. You can make truth falsehood, falsehood truth. If you control the media, if you control the Justice Department, if you control the police, you own the system.